I am one of the candidates that's been announced for vice president, but I am not speaking to you today as a candidate. I'm speaking to you today as the Unity spokesman, Unity through Community. And I'm doing that because I feel that presidential nominating conventions are a time for soul searching. And as we select the candidates to carry our message to the public, it's a time to ask ourselves what it's going to take for us to be the party of the 21st century. And I've suggested that unity through community is the keystone upon which organized activism rests. Community comes through extraordinary respect for each other. But exactly how do we achieve this extraordinary respect? The answer to that question, I believe, is simple but profound. And to encourage you to consider it seriously, I'm going to use a very, very radical example, even by libertarian standards. It's an extremely personal and private illustration of how expansive and all-encompassing our philosophy really is. Last March, my mother drew her last breath. And as you might imagine, this was a difficult time for those of us she left behind. But shortly before her passing, my mother told me something which brought me comfort during this time. You see, this was not the first time my mother had died. 20 years ago, while I was in college, my mother collapsed after major surgery. While the doctors attempted to resuscitate her, she felt herself floating towards a bridge. On the other side was a great white light and her own dear mother, who had died before she had even reached her teenage years. She told my mother that she could cross the bridge, or she could go back to her small children, my younger brothers and sisters. My mother decided to return to us and found herself back in the hospital. She kept the story to herself until shortly before her passing, for fear we'd think she had lost her senses. Now, before someone rushes out to call the men in the little white coats to come and take me away, let me remind you that I have been a research scientist for well over 15 years. And so in true research fashion, I went out to collect more data. I inquired of my medical colleagues what they knew about this type of phenomena, and they told me that such tales were increasing along with our ability to bring people back from the brink of death. The physicians who have researched this phenomena estimate that 1 out of 20 people will experience it at some time in their lives. In other words, as they approach death, they will have a libertarian experience. Now, I didn't think you were going to laugh at that. Now, I thought you would wonder why it was libertarian, and so I was going to tell you. It's a libertarian experience because, like my mother, many of those who have had a near-death experience felt they were given a choice between life and death, and that their choice was honored. Now, choice, of course, is what libertarianism is all about. We support choice not only in education, but in every aspect of our life. And choice ends where coercive government begins. So we choose. So we choose not to initiate force or fraud against others, not to use the guns of government to force our choices upon others. We honor our neighbor's choice, even when we don't agree with it. Truly, the Libertarian Party is more than the party of principle. It is the party of choice. And as libertarians, we also believe that we must take responsibility for our actions. If we lie about someone or steal from them, we must make it right again by paying the person back for their loss of time and money. In doing so, we directly experience the results of our actions on the other person. We reap as we sow. Researchers report that in the near-death experience, this aspect of libertarian philosophy is also present. Evidently, many people see their life pass before their eyes when they are close to death. During this life review, they directly experience the harm they have done to others. If they've lied about someone, they experience the embarrassment they've caused the other person. If they've stolen, they experience the loss of their victim. They reap as they sow. Of course, we don't have to wait until death to reap as we sow. Just look at the Soviet Union. Communism is a political philosophy built on total disregard of choice. The elite of the party imposes their choice on everyone else, at gunpoint, if necessary. Today, the Soviet government is experiencing the results of its actions. They cannot feed or clothe their people. In many places, their air and water is hopelessly polluted. When we do not honor our neighbor's choice, when we put a gun to their heads, we utilize the tools and tactics of war. And no one who has ever seen war doubts that it is the most rapid path to poverty ever devised. The Soviets are merely reaping as they have sown. Notice that we needed to do little to bring them to their economic knees, other than stay out of their way. We did not need to attack the Soviets or defend against their attack. We did not bomb them. We did not invade their shores. We simply managed to stay away from them long enough to let nature take its course. They condemned themselves by their own actions, for coercion always results in poverty and strife. The ends and means are intimately related. Indeed, the ends are the means made manifest. So you see, life is a very libertarian experience. By definition, it has to be, since we derive our libertarian principles from the nature of humankind. Since nature is redundant and consistent, we should expect death to be a libertarian experience as well. I've shared with you two aspects of the death experience that can be readily identified as libertarian. There is a third characteristic, however. We don't normally consider libertarian, but I think that we should. I believe this third characteristic represents an important facet of our philosophy, one on which the extraordinary respect that creates community rests. While people near death were going through their life review, experiencing the impact of their actions upon others, they were accompanied by a being of light. And depending on their life philosophy, they identified it as their own superconscious, God, or another more enlightened individual. This being was uncritical and supportive, even when the people themselves were shamed by the suffering that they had brought to others. The being told them this was the only way they learned, the only way they could learn, by making the very best choices they knew how, and experiencing the consequences of their actions. It did not label them as good or evil, right or wrong. It simply stood by to encourage them as they recognized that in harming others, they had been acting against their own self-interest. In other words, it did not judge. In an otherwise libertarian experience, there was no judgment. Nature, redundant and consistent, my friends, is sending us a strong message. Judgment is not the libertarian way. Most people fail to honor their neighbor's choice, not because they are evil or immoral, but because they are ignorant. They just don't realize that forcing or deceiving others is not in their own best self-interest. Most people are simply doing the very best they know how. If we wish to enlighten them, then like the light, we must provide an atmosphere of support where they can grow and learn. Ayn Rand, whose writings brought many of us, myself included, into the libertarian movement, told us to judge and be prepared to be judged. She faithfully judged those around her and died lonely. This woman, who gave so much to the world, who should have been surrounded in her golden years by an admiring, caring, loving following, found herself virtually alone. The Libertarian Party, that has so much to give the world, also finds itself virtually alone. Perhaps we are only reaping as we have sown. We blame an ignorant public for not embracing our ideas, but perhaps we drive them away with our judgment. For judgment, my friends, is the seed of coercion, the very force we seek to eradicate. Coercion always begins with, I'm right and you're wrong, and I will force you to behave as I think you should. When we are judgmental, people sense that we harbor the seed of coercion, even as we denounce it. They sense a contradiction and are repelled. Ayn Rand, in my estimation, was a genius. I believe her ideas about judgment were mistaken, and that they are keeping us from manifesting our destiny. I believe she would have been the first to applaud our ability to extend our philosophy beyond the limits that she herself set upon it. For more than anything, this wonderful woman wanted intellectual heirs. Let us honor her by cultivating the heritage she left us, so that it will flourish and grow. When we stop judging, respect thrives in its stead. From extraordinary respect comes the community and unity of purpose that attracts people as powerfully as words do. Now, you might ask legitimately, how do we keep from judging those who advocate coercion and yet be true to our principles? Well, to those who practice coercion, we can say, I will stay out of your way or defend against you if I must, but I will watch and I will wait for the time when you begin to realize that in forcing others you only injure yourself. And at that time, I will try to be there for you to show you that there is a better way. Let me provide an example of this. You know, Kalamazoo is a small town, and so in my many campaigns in the area, I run into the same people time after time. Among them is an elected official who believes that heavy taxation and government programs help the poor. Now, as we know, these actions based in coercion do just the opposite. When I get up to counter what this person says, I do not condemn or criticize. I agree with the ultimate purpose and explain how the means of coercion do not take us to our goal, simply citing the wealth of information that supports my contention. One day, this person of courage and wisdom may very well see the light, so to speak, and realize that much effort has been expended for naught. And if that time should ever come, I hope I have the wisdom of the light to be supportive and help make that transition. Instead of chiding people for their past, I'd like to welcome them into the future, the libertarian future. As a result of this attitude, I treat this person with respect. My opponent, sensing my goodwill, thinks highly of me as well. My opponent has actually let me know when there's a media event so I can get an invitation, and has taken me aside to learn more about the libertarian philosophy. I doubt that would have ever happened had I been judgmental, condemning, and condescending. Treating even those who disagree with us with extraordinary respect gains us their respect. When even our opponents respect us and listen to us, we will have created the setting for large donations, media coverage, and widespread publicity. And our opponents will listen. Those who advocate coercion to achieve compassion will listen not only because they care, but because it is in their own personal self-interest to do so. I once had an opportunity to ask an international power broker who practiced coercion regularly why he wasn't happy. He had all the things that coercion can bring: power, money, women. Yet he told me in a moment of candor that he felt alone, apart, separated from people in general. He had lost the sense of community with the rest of humankind, and it ate at his soul. And how could he feel otherwise? He routinely treated others with the disrespect of judgment. I'm right, you're wrong. And I'm going to force you or deceive you into doing things the way I want you to do them. I'm right and you're wrong creates separation between us. When we judge others, we set them apart from ourselves. When we set them apart, we lose our sense of community, of belonging. That is an important part of our human happiness. Thus, those who judge and coerce lose their lifeline to community and an important facet of human happiness. That is why solitary confinement is such an effective punishment. It is a rare individual that feels such a strong bond with humankind that it transcends physical separation. That is why coercion will one day become a thing of the past. It hurts its practitioners far too much to be a lasting institution. At the Michigan Convention this year, our retiring chair expressed pleasure at sensing the spirit of community that he felt was evolving among us. He was uncomfortable, though, at using what he considered to be socialist rhetoric. Talk about community and love of neighbor should be our rhetoric. After all, how can liberals claim love of neighbor when they give one person money, taken at gunpoint, to another? If we truly believe in brotherly love, if we truly believe in helping the needy, then we must first apply our own time and money to solving the problem. And that is part of what we are doing here. For most poverty, if not all of it in the world today, is caused by the guns of government preventing individuals from creating wealth for themselves and for their loved ones. Soviet socialism is an example of such policies taken to an extreme. No liberal who advocates such government intervention can legitimately claim to be advocating love of neighbor. Only those who honor their neighbor's choice can do so. Only libertarians can legitimately lay claim to practicing the political equivalent of universal love. We are not just the party of principle. We are the party of self-responsibility, the party of choice, the party of universal tolerance, respect, and yes, the party of love, love of neighbor. When we embrace the whole of our philosophy, we will truly be the party of the 21st century.